How are you doing today?
Very well, just very busy.
Okay.
We've got some quotes that have been sent out and a couple of other projects that are kicking off soon. So it's just managing contracts and, giving updates to stakeholders.
Yeah, I'm sure it
And
must be so tedious, especially this time of year and this time of month. It's always hectic.
exactly. And with 2 months to go, yeah, it's very hectic. So
Yeah.
it's just trying to get, because even now I'm on my phone. I was about to leave and then I saw an email from you. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I almost forgot.
Don't stress. And we won't be long at all, I promise you. I have three quick questions for you. We just want to know a little bit about what you do and who you are. So I'd love for you to just introduce yourself. I know quite a bit about you and your business purely because of the way we got introduced. However, I'd love for you to introduce yourself for our audiences.
Okay, cool. Okay, obviously name's Athi and I have been doing techie stuff since primary school. I was in,
Wow.
computer society, and then I joined the computer club in high school. I was captain at one point, really geeky stuff. So I think technology has formed, or has been part of my journey for the longest of time. And then I went to WITS for study in 2007. And I think that's where my world started opening up in terms of, opportunities that are out there. And then in the 3-4 years that I was there, towards the end, I was top of my class in terms of programming.
That's amazing.
And we had a group project. Thank you. So we had a group project of which we ended up representing FITS at the Microsoft Imagine Cup in that year. So
Wow.
you also get exposure in terms of other techies similar to you from UCT, UJ, and all these other prestigious universities. And I think one of my highlights being at WITS was, I was on a sports bursary, but I kind of balanced it out with academics.
So cool.
And funny enough, I got 3 awards for academics and I got 3 for sport. So it was like a nice indicator
But
that,
truly you have the full package there. That's amazing.
the balance. Yeah, the balance. And yeah, so part of why I even went to WITS just out of interest instead of going to UCT was because I actually wanted, not in an ugly way, I wanted to go into an environment where I didn't know anyone, because UCT is not that far from the Eastern Cape. It's almost like a repeat in terms
Yeah,
of culture.
yeah, very similar.
The languages as well. So I wanted to just grow out of it and start afresh and see all the accolades that I got in high school, playing rugby, Craven Week, athletics. So I just wanted to see, could I replicate all of those things, or at least the majority thereof, in
Yeah,
a completely different province? And Gauteng was the choice. And I had to start from scratch, 0 friends.
must have been
Um,
crazy.
yeah, it was.
But
But
look where it's
I think,
brought you. I mean, look how well you're doing now. So it's
yeah,
definitely the right move.
yeah, no, I agree. Because I met some incredibly smart people, and I think that's one of my highlights. At university is I'm still friends with some of these incredibly smart people, and even with COVID, just as an example, I'll pick up the phone. Hey, Natasha, she works at Pfizer, or speak to another friend who works at a different, one of these vaccine companies when I've got questions. So it helped being friends with,
Yeah,
so many different people,
of course.
and it helps with insights into issues that are beyond, my own sort of domain of expertise. And then lastly, I think on the varsity side, my highlight was in my final year. Obviously, I had good marks. I got KPMG award and what have you. But
Wow.
one of the things that really stood out was when I actually got a job before I finished or graduated.
Amazing.
Yeah,
That's unbelievable. Wow,
yeah.
that's
So
that's
I
like an
actually,
honor. That's
it was. So I was so excited. But I think for me, one of the biggest, I think it's just a feeling of saying to the folks back home, I've got a job, I'm going to be paying my own rent, like that independence where I'm going to
yeah,
start earning. I don't need your guys' help, not in an ugly way, but it's just feeling like I'm starting to become an adult. And the company was Bombardier. It's an international company, Canadian/French. And we worked on the Gauteng project. So next time you're on the Gautrain and you swipe or you go in one of the buses, just know I was part of the team that built.
So cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so that was beginning of the year in 2010. And then towards June, because of the World Cup and whatnot, we actually pushed to actually deliver earlier than planned. And so the way I got at my job, that's basically where it became sort of strenuous because I was given more tasks, but then at varsity, the agreement with the faculty officers was that I'd attend 45 minutes on a Monday, and then obviously I'm not on campus, and then on Friday I do another 45 minutes max, and then go to work. Yeah, and then
you had to do all that work at home, all the varsity work.
Exactly. It was hectic. I don't want to lie, but at the same time, it was a big shift in terms of managing stress and things like that. And then I think I got it right until July, August, and then work just took over. I just couldn't cope academically.
Yeah.
So
That
I went from
that makes sense.
So I went from averaging like really high, like an A, to like a D. But I remember saying, I just want to pass. I just want to get out of varsity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You had your job already. So then,
exactly.
Of course. But can I ask you, so how did you actually balance these things? Did you have some sort of schedule that you try to work on? Obviously, things come up and you can't always stick to them. But did you try and stick to a certain schedule, like say in the mornings you do this and in the afternoons you do this, and then you'd find time on the weekends for your studies? Because even if you maintained that those really high marks for 6-7 months, that's a long time to be working that hard. And you said you were working, you got a KPMG award. So does that mean, what exactly did you study? Just so I can piece that together.
So I did a triple major. So I did information systems, which is where KPMG came in.
Wow.
I did insurance and risk. And then purely because of the ladies, I joined, I actually liked psychology. And then I couldn't take it to final year, but I could skip 1 year. So I joined the class for human resource management, which had the same theories.
Yeah,
so the shift
people.
Yes, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm following the lead.
That is the funniest thing I've ever heard.
That is the only
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how you chose your third major. I love that story.
Yes,
That's amazing.
it was just the ladies. I was like, you know what? I'll find you, and I actually quite enjoyed
You're right,
it.
hey, you are right, because the ladies that take those subjects always arrive at university in the most beautiful outfits. Their nails and hair always done, always looking beautiful. So you're right. I mean, I'm gonna give you that. That's a good point. That's so funny.
Yeah. So they got the better of me. So I ended up majoring in it, and I obviously befriended quite a few. And so that actually opened up, because I had almost extremes. I had friends in sport. I had friends who were extremely academics to a point where they'd become almost like socially awkward. So it also helped sort of widening my network. But to answer your question around balancing, funny enough, one thing that's been consistent from varsity until now is trying to arrive at whatever the balance is. And I've probably failed more often than I can remember in terms of striking a balance, because there never really is one.
There's no exact science.
Yeah. So I've always tried. But one of the things that has sort of come up is, especially with relationships, if you're dating, is that you need to tell the person up front, look, this is who I am. I'm very driven. And also making time. We almost have to like schedule it, as opposed to doing something sporadically. And in some cases you try, if the person comes up with something or whatever. But it's always been difficult.
Yeah,
and I literally had to quit sport, because remember I said I had a bursary. So I had to quit something in order to facilitate for these other things. But I think that was the stint at Wits. And funny enough, the theme has always had that challenge. How do you balance between A and B? And one of the things that was my next journey was around investment banking after graduating with Standard Bank.
Wow.
And if you might recall that year, 2010, that I think the biggest retrenchments in South Africa at the time. So in as much as, you're going to interviews, because they had like 4,000 plus people applying from the different varsities in the country. And they needed to narrow it down to like 25.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I met some incredibly smart people. And one of the most beautiful things at the finals, because you go from 4,000 plus to 3,000 to 2,000.
It's so cool.
Yeah, and then the most beautiful thing was when we got to the finals. In high school, we were quite competitive. So we had the top 10. And one of the things we really liked was you'd make the Craven Week or, cricket, provincial, but you could still make it in the top 10 academic. So when we got to the finals, believe it or not, some of the guys from my high school, they was like, we can't believe we made it thus far and we're competing, So
cool. Truly the best of both worlds, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So we got into the whole investment banking thing, and then Standard Bank had said, look, we're trying to get more females into technology. We're gonna have to make it. Yeah, and it was hard. I won't lie to you. So I'm a big fan of transformation and what have you. But at the same time, it's also just realizing it comes at a cost. Someone will be on a back foot. And in that case, it was like, you know what, Athi, we can't take you now. You did make the top 25 or top 70 or whatever.
That's phenomenal, though. The journey.
Exactly.
That's
amazing. The journey. Yeah, it was. I won't lie to you. I when I got the news that I can't go on in terms of being employed, because I'd also risked. I only applied to Standard Bank for investment banking.
Fair enough.
So when they told me that, look, we can't take you, and then I befriended the two ladies that had been accepted. It was so hard. I remember crying at a petrol station, and I called my mom, and I told her what had happened, and she was like, "You know what, son, you've done well. Don't worry, something will come up."
Of course.
And yeah, so Standard Bank called to say, "Hey, dude, did you know that we own?" I think at the time it was 49% of Liberty or something to that effect.
Oh, wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, so they're buying Liberty 100% now. I think it's been happening in the last week or so. But at the time, they only owned about 49% or some, but it was a majority shareholding. So they said because of that ownership, they can get me into the interview in the top 20, I think. They said, look, we can get you in because you've done well with Standard Bank. So try it out. And the advantage I had was that I'd done insurance and risk.
Exactly.
So
that's what you've been studying. Yeah.
Yeah. And funny enough, things went so well. I got the job at Liberty and I loved
phenomenal.
it. And 3 months later, Standard Bank said, hey, by the way, we've got your job back. If you want to come through.
No way. That's so crazy.
Yeah. And then I declined and I did the whole Liberty stint for 3.5 years. And then that's when I resigned to basically start my own business.
Wow.
And it's been a journey and a half. More failures than wins. Yeah. So
can you imagine?
Yeah. And I think just for your own knowledge, in terms of where InfoByte is, because the essence of the business is around data. So hence the name InfoByte.
Yes.
It's about getting information. And then
very
obviously
clever name. Very, very clever name.
Thank you. So it's basically recognizing, how important data is. And that also came from the Gauteng project, where you could look at patterns of people taking trips, and it could also help with marketing because you would know who lives in which areas have the most traffic and things like that. So I think because of that exposure, it helped a lot to say this thing called data is so important in terms of making decisions about other train stations that were not built in 2010 yet. because we do simulations and say, if this area with this population,
Yes,
and these are the kind of trips, then Rosebank and another area would do well, or whatever the case might be.
of course.
So the company was started on that basis alone, to say it will focus mainly on data and its value and how we can basically give a competitive advantage to customers, So
This actually makes so much sense. Can I tell you why? Because over the last week or so since we got in contact, I was looking into InfoByte and I was looking up more information about it just to see exactly what it is that you do. Of course, Mark told me a bit about you and you introduced yourself, but I wanted to learn a bit more. And I saw that on your website, to quote your website, in fact, you said that you guys use a fit for purpose and client-driven type work. And based on everything you've just said, the fact that you've had so much experience, not only in so many different businesses and different elements of the businesses, but within those businesses, you get to interact with so many different clients with different needs and different employees with different kinds of work ethics. So it makes so much sense that this is the kind of mission you now have through InfoByte. It makes so much sense.
Thanks for that. I'm glad you picked up on that. And I think one of the most beautiful things about, interacting with different clients over the years and solving different problems is that, by the time you get to year 7, which I'm on now, if I'm not mistaken, is that there's certain things you can spot very quickly, and arriving at a solution, because you've had all this exposure, you've seen this issue in this financial institution, you've seen this problem in this particular area, and putting together a solution becomes, a lot easier than most people who are starting out recently. So but one of the biggest shifts for InfoByte was we did a lot of consulting, for like big clients. And then 2019, I made a call to say, in fact, we got exposure with Capitec on a project that we had worked on financial wellness. So that's the closest we had gotten to building our own product, but we had to work with a wellness company. And then in 2019, after having gotten that taste, the call was made by myself to say, let's shift the company from, consulting and selling all these hours to building our own products, So that's when I started engaging with Visa to say we're going to build our own payment solution. And we worked, 2020 was probably the most brutal year of business ever, because it caught a lot of people off guard. And I was so psyched, Kelsey, in terms of, we're really gonna nail 2020. We're gonna get like proper sales, and things are just gonna go well. So we even canceled certain consultancy contracts we had in Jan and Feb.
Really?
And obviously, we canceled contracts. That's how confident, I was.
Yeah, of course.
And I just returned from China because we had signed a deal with Huawei as well. So there was some AI stuff that we were going to do. And I was so psyched. And then obviously March, the whole lockdown started. And Kelsey, it's been hectic since then. Yeah, it's been hectic since then in terms of trying to recover. But in the last week or so, last month or so, things are slowly getting back to normal, But
great.
A lot of businesses went down. Yeah. So that's been a nutshell with my journey. But either way, I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
I'm sure.
Challenges. Yeah.
I want to just ask, I'm going to send you another Zoom link because I think this one is going to run out soon. You know how there's like a time limit on it. So I want to ask you a couple more questions. I'm going to send you another Zoom link. If the meeting cuts out, otherwise I think we can just rejoin this one again and it will start over. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but if it cuts out, I'm going to send you another one, or we can rejoin this one, whichever one you prefer, just in case it does end. Okay.
No, not a problem. You know what's funny about Zoom? Just a very quick one. Having worked with the Chinese since 2019, they set up a meeting and then they sent a link. Mm-hmm. I kid you not. The link had Zoom on it. When I clicked on the link, the spelling went from ZOOM to ZHUME, Zume,
What?
right?
Okay. That's so
And then
funny.
the color scheme, everything about the app, it works exactly like Zoom.
But it's a different model almost. That's so cool.
Yes, completely different. And
That is
yeah,
very
so I haven't used Zoom in a while because I have a lot of meetings with them. It's either Teams or that other Zoom in
fair
version.
enough. Fair enough.
But yeah, so yeah, don't worry. I'll just join whichever link you send.
Okay,
It's
cool.
fine.
Cool. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is actually very linked to what we were chatting about earlier in terms of your values and missions in InfoByte, and as a young business owner, So what I wanted to ask you is your missions of client-based work and fit for purpose and trying to kind of mold things according to whoever you're dealing with specifically. How do these kinds of values help you create better relationships with your clients and with your employees? Because obviously, clients are super important for every business. They won't run without clients, but same goes for employees. You can't run a business successfully without happy, functioning employees.
Yeah. Yeah, spot on. So one of the things when it comes to culture is you lead from the front, if I can put it that way.
Of course.
So the way you engage with a client, you make sure that, the sales guys are watching you.
Yeah.
And there's actually a shift, when clients pick up that you're well-versed in certain areas, you can substantiate certain things based on research, you quickly build trust with them.
Of course.
And they also reveal a bit more information, which often happens a bit later, depending on, how long it takes for the client to trust you.
Yes.
But
exactly.
coming back to the point of sort of tailor making solutions, is that it's understanding the client's problem to the T. You ask a lot of questions, and in building that relationship with the client, you get to understand even, the history of this problem. So I'll give you an example, is that you'll find, when you have big corporates, when you're dealing with a particular problem, you'll find in those discussions with, different analysts from that particular institution, is that at some point, corporate A bought a whole lot of other smaller companies over the years.
Yeah.
And what you find is in all these acquisitions, there was a Kelsey system, there was an Athi system, and there was a Mark system, and all these systems are different, and somehow they need to talk to each other. So when you get into that history, it adds a bit of an edge in terms of how you solve the problem, because you've got all of that history in terms of putting a solution together and actually propose. And one of my highlights in terms of understanding a client's, request, but also giving them something over and above what they actually asked for, was when we were dealing with a bank, when we were doing a project around wellness, was that we had picked up a pattern in the employees, more particular in female employees that were not paying, their debts on time or their credit obligations. So it was outside of the scope of what the work that we were given, but through data, we actually picked up, a social issue. And that's something that really stuck with me, is that firstly, I realized how stupid sometimes men can be, not intentionally, because there are things we just don't know. Really, we don't know. So I don't know if a female is pregnant and she goes on maternity leave, she gets paid less. Had no
fair
clue.
enough.
Fair
enough. Those
so
tedious details, yeah.
Yes, it's little things, but what you learn over the years, it's the sum of these little things that create this disconnect between males and females.
Yeah, of course.
So
of course.
Achi will say something in a meeting, and Kelsey will say, "This guy is a total douchebag," and it's no fault of his own. It's just the disconnect.
Of course, it's different knowledge.
Exactly, So you learn, and then you get to a position where, because of your past experience, there are meetings you walk in, you share certain insights, and then you look at the reactions on the females, like, this guy, he seems to know quite a bit.
Exactly. That's how you build
And then
trust.
exactly, so as soon as they feel understood as well, that's also how, you can build a good rapport with the client.
Of course, that makes so much sense.
Yeah,
And it's nice. Yeah, it's nice because you see your clients and your employees will see, okay, cool, this is a business that goes out of their way to, even if there's nothing you can do to change a situation, you're going to go out of your way to understand the situation, to try and help in any way you can, which is really cool. That's what the world needs these days.
Yeah. So, but I think one of the things that, I've picked up, it's when a client feels they understood.
Yeah.
If you can hit that on the nail, you'll build a very good relationship, with clients. So yeah, that's basically, part of sort of the culture you create, and also having employees watch, you basically execute on those values as well.
Yeah, of course. That's actually really interesting. It's a really amazing thing to be implementing in your business, because that is, as you said, that is the way forward. That is the way that we make change, and we make not only the businesses successful, but everyone that is involved in the business, whether it be an employee or a client. That's really, really great. And I'm sure, as you said earlier, the pandemic made things challenging and exciting and all these different emotions. So what I wanted to ask you next is, of course, a big part of any business is, like I said earlier, the employees. And part of employees being able to function and be productive is their ability to, I guess, manage their finances and have some sort of financial wellness and financial security. So what I wanted to ask you is related to that. And the question is, with the pandemic and the undeniable urgency that we need for financial wellness in the world today, how do you think economic impacts of this pandemic might be improved through these good employee-client type relationships? Do you think that a business who implements financial wellness schemes, or a business that tries to, I guess, consciously look out for the financial wellness of their employees, do you think that would make a difference in this pandemic? Do you think it has?
I'd say definitely. I mean, I think any company that has a program in place, would definitely put the employees at an advantage. And I think over and above, even if you take maybe a step back, if you've got a program in place that focuses on the mental wellness, leave the financial.
Yes.
Because I think that's one thing, that I can really think of right now, is that I underestimated, how badly this affected even the guys that were, some have left, and it also made me realize my limits, as an employer, because they were going through things that they could not overcome on their own. And they even said, we could see how stressed you were just to keep the business alive. We didn't even want to stress you even more. So it got so hectic last year that, because I remember I even said to the team, hey guys, we don't have clients, things just did not go according to plan. As you've seen, we've canceled contracts that were stable, that were bringing decent revenue. We didn't have any issues, but because we canceled those, and to get them back, it's going to be a mission and a half. And also a lot of companies stopped with engaging on new contracts, so which was a bit difficult to redeem those. So I had to basically, and you see the HR actually helped, because I basically went through, the laws when it comes to reducing people's salaries. So there's nothing unlawful about it, but you need consent. There needs to be an agreement. So I basically had to pitch to everyone to say, guys, the only way I can ensure that everyone still has a job at least 6 months from March is that if we reduce salaries by at least 15%, and I buy in. But what scared me, Kelsey, was that, and it's also something that I think made me realize, the majority of South Africans are living hand to mouth, because that 15% change caused havoc in these guys' families. And obviously there were fights with their partners at home, and some employees had so many dependents, cousins and what have you, that they needed to take care of. And when all of those things were not happening, one, it broke my heart that he was being threatened to be disowned by his family, which highlights a much deeper social problem. How do you tell someone in your own family, if you don't send money, whatever, we're going to disown you? So those things caused a lot of stress. And I think corporates who can afford programs and therapists over and above having a wellness program would certainly position the employees in a much better way than smaller companies, because these things are possible. So they definitely are important, Kelsey, in terms of putting programs together. But we also need to acknowledge that they do cost money.
Of course, you need the resources to do so.
Yeah, so it's important, costly, but absolutely necessary. To sum it up.
Of course. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because no one was expecting to go from normal day living to a pandemic where everything was turned upside down, so that's why I think, listen, I'm new to this industry. I am very, very new to this industry. So this is why these kinds of interviews are so helpful to me personally, and I know to our audience as well, because it just helps us understand things from different perspectives, and I know that something I would never have thought about a year and a half ago is something like a financial wellness scheme in a business, because and thinking of those things proactively, because at the end of the day, we had never experienced something such as the COVID pandemic to kind of come into our businesses and tear them apart, So it's just a really interesting thing to discuss. And I wanted to ask you, so we've actually already discussed one of the questions, like woven within the one that your answer that you just gave me, which is really awesome. But I wanted to ask you, so if you are thinking of, you mentioned employee mental wellness, right? And we've been discussing financial wellness, and physical wellness is obviously also an important element of this. What is take financial wellness schemes, for example? That's a fantastic way to implement financial security for employees. What do you think, if you could do anything, if you could have, I don't know, an unlimited budget or all the resources possible, what is some sort of implementation that you would make to kind of improve the physical wellness of your employees? How would you do that?
The closest I can think of is something sort of Discovery's working on. Where, because what they've done very well is they've created an incentive, to be healthier, So what they've done is they've partnered obviously with a whole lot of institutions where you have your vitality points redeemed, at the gym or at this particular eatery or whatever the case might be. So I think to encourage people to be healthier, especially on the physical side, is you need to create those incentives. And it's basically dangling the carrot. But I think at the same time, you also need to scare them just enough, so you've got a stick on the one hand, you've got a carrot on the other hand. To say, the stick is, statistically speaking, South Africans are becoming as obese now as what Americans are.
Exactly.
So with that, you've got type 1, type 2 diabetes, you've got heart issues, hypertension, so when you bring that to, to be known by people, to say, guys, we actually becoming worse off. But at the same time, you say to someone, look, here's a carrot. If you do A, B, C, and D, then you qualify for X, Y, Z, and I think, I'm assuming Discovery has done research, because one of the things I've never seen them do is they use cash in their rewards system. Because if you say, I'll pay you to do something, I think that would create, and I'm sure they've done extensive research on it, it will introduce like bad and unsustainable habits
Of course.
in terms of you're only healthy because you're getting paid or whatever the case might be.
Exactly.
But I think first foremost would be creating a sort of physical wellness, campaign where you make people aware of the fact that, your health, even rich people, in as much as they struggled rather to get to where they are, some of them, by the time they reached, that pinnacle of success, they had incurred so many stresses that had a very negative impact on their health.
Exactly.
To a point where now they're spending a lot of their money on, doctor's visits and things like that. So if you've got a campaign to address and bring to everyone's attention that, your health is actually another version of wealth, I think that would go far as well.
Exactly. That's so
and
true.
then I think,
yeah.
And
I think that you know this better than anyone, because not only are you involved in the business corporate aspect of this, but you've also, as you said, you've been highly involved in sports your whole life, which means you have the health aspect very much instilled in your values as well,
so it's incredibly important, being active, and I think it's just making it such a way that people see value in it, and also tying it up to say, if you can find a very skillful way of maybe hiring people to bring the correlation between the healthier you are, it does translate to, a positive impact on your finances. Because if you're always sick, you're going to end up in hospital more frequently. So if you can come up with some sort of a model to say your health kind of cross-subsidizes your health expenses, so that you're not at a doctor, at a clinic, or visiting the pharmacy often enough. I think that would definitely help, going forward. But it's something we've neglected as a country. I don't want to lie.
We have greatly. And it also, again, it comes from the unfortunate lack of resources that we have as a country. It's so many of the problems we have, whether it be financial, physical, emotional, because, as you said, they're all linked. The lack of physical health will lead to the financial problems, which can lead to the mental strain and the emotional strain, which then leads to further physical health. And it's this vicious cycle of, and that's a very prominent issue in South Africa because of the poverty and the extreme differences in wealth that is experienced here, so it's just really interesting to think about these things and to chat to someone like you who knows this truly better than anyone. So
I'll tell you something you touched on earlier, actually, which again gives me sort of an advantage of sorts. We actually worked on a project which involved farmers. So imagine a techie is involved with farmers. What the heck, But funny enough, we had built an onboarding platform where we could basically connect farmers to sort of buyers, if you wish. So with each farm and farm owner, but we focused on not the top tier guys who run their farms like an F&B or Nedbank. It's your middle tier who are making enough, maybe a few millions, but not those insane amounts. But essentially what we're trying to do is build a profile of each farm to say, Kelsey owns this farm, it's got a pack house, it's got the following, whether it's crop farming or with animals, whatever the configuration of your farm is. And then based on that, we are able to say, let's now connect this farmer to 100 possible channels through which they can sell their products or their produce. But what we learned during that process was, for instance, if you engage a Woolies, as an example, was that they would want their tomatoes to be a certain grade, So now you almost reverse engineer their requirement. And this is where now you realize farming in its vanilla or traditional sense is not enough. I often hear this, we used to farm, 100 years ago or 50 years ago or 20 years ago, it should be the same. No, there's climate change and a whole lot of other variables that affect, the prospects of you having good yields. Coming back to the Woolies example is that they give you a benchmark in terms of this is a standard you need to produce for us to take produce from you. So when you work it back, you realize the only person that would qualify to supply Woolies at those great prices is you would need, people that work with soil, the acidity of the soil itself, because it does affect the kind of grade you would produce as your yield,
Yes, of course.
but also not using pesticides and using an alternative. So in all of that, we also realize that there's a perception that South Africans struggle with, is that eating healthy is actually expensive. In most cases, it may seem that way, but it's actually not as bad as what most people may realize. So we came across these farmers that I think it's hydroponics or whatever, but they use those, it's almost like greenhouses basically, where they're growing the stuff in. Yeah, so it was those kind of setups, and engaging with them, watching them produce, the stuff that they work with or whatever, and having those available at certain restaurants, you get to realize that eating healthy doesn't have to be as expensive as what most people think. True. It's just that we're not exploring the options enough. So if you were to link eating healthy with exercise, I tell you now, Kelsey, would have a much healthier, citizenship. But as it stands, it's not looking good.
No, of course. And that's something that's going to take so much time and energy and effort from businesses and just the South African people in general to try and make that difference. That's what our side of dynamic body technology is trying to do. We're trying to promote, firstly, healthier workforces, because say someone comes across one of these podcast interviews, or someone implements one of our wellness schemes in their business, and then that person can go and take that knowledge home to their families, who will spread it to their friends, and that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal. But it's just really cool to hear from you, because I can tell you have a lot of really good knowledge about this stuff, firstly, but also I feel like I can tell that you want to do a lot of really cool things, and that's amazing, because that's what we need in this country. And it's been really great to chat to you. So that's all my questions. If you have any, let me know. But it's been so awesome to talk to you and to hear your perspective on these things. Honestly, I've actually learned so much today.
Thanks, Kelsey. I think as a last sort of parting comment, I think it's so I grew up sort of from a very sort of religious background.
Oh yes.
And I'm not even close to that now, but I think what that did over the years when I was in high school or whatever, is that it created, sort of this, not instinct, but you want to do something bigger than yourself.
Of course.
And part of building these businesses and forging these networks and partnerships, it's basically creating a springboard that one day you'll be a prominent enough business person that can actually wield, some of the decisions and policies that get made, by our politicians who have no clue, by the way, in most cases.
Exactly.
So part of why I'm building all of these things, it's to get to that level where you are able to influence those kind of decisions, obviously for the betterment of the citizens in the country.
Exactly.
So that's the long-term goal.
Amazing.
And hopefully I'll run the country one day.
Listen, I would do anything for you to run the country based on this conversation. Sounds like the most hopeful situation in the world. You sound like you have your head screwed on the right way, where you need to go, what you need to do. So I think that's a fantastic goal to have, honestly. Even if you have just some sort of say in it, that would be unbelievable. So I'm gonna follow up on that in a few years' time, see how your campaigning is going for all these implementations of these things. But honestly, it's been such an awesome time chatting to you, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me on a Friday afternoon. I so appreciate it, and I know that our audience will as well, because if I learned a lot, I know our audience will too.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Kelsey. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And I will keep in contact with you, and I hope to hear about many more exciting things happening, and I'm glad to hear that business is picking up and everything at the moment. So that's awesome. Have a good weekend, and thank you so much again.
Thanks to you, and same to you.
Thank you.